team. Each week, our team crowdsources some of the most interesting things we found across every corner of the internet, adding a little insight from our respective roles in creative, research, insights, strategy, planning, and digital work. As curious thinkers, we go the extra mile by capturing our perspectives on one of the week's most interesting topics, and we call it the drop. So let's drop into the conversation today. According to an annual startup ranking published by Andreessen Horowitz, mental health continues to be a top concern, and investors and entrepreneurs are taking notice. The mental health category this year is the fastest growing, with 4 startups making the list. They are Headway, Sondermind, Alma, and Path Mental Health. So how did we get this increased focus and need for mental health? Is there a business need for more? Do we have too much? Jill, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so the big focus, new push, I mean, it's not new, it's just a new emphasis. So that makes me think too, how do we get here? So like every business starts with a need, right? There's a need in the space for X, and that's why companies start. So looking back to, do we have this need because there were, events over the past year that heightened this need? Or is it because we all now have access to, let's say, the internet and more modes of researching on our own, or modes of communication, or maybe too much communication with social media, maybe too much stimulation, and maybe that's what started it. So is it a new business need because of what's come before it, or is it a new business need because of the environment, or all of the above? But it's really interesting to see too, because obviously that's the new need. And if mental health and wellness is the new need, what's going to be the need after that? Which is interesting to see. Are we going to start, becoming our own doctors and coming up with our own ways to combat our own mental health and illness? And I mean, some people are doing that already on their own too. But what is the next step? Because obviously we've done, the internet has, like I mentioned, brought more communication and research capabilities and information at our fingertips. And that led to where we are today. And if mental health and wellness is kind of where we are today, what's after that? So that's kind of my interest in this new focus is, not only what started it, what brought the focus up to the forefront to make these businesses so popular now, but what's going to come after that too. So that's my curiosity on that one too.
Yeah, we're all very curious on it of, what comes next. I know personal health journeys look different for everyone. I started with BetterHelp pre-pandemic, and that's kind of only been my experience. It's the virtual access to therapy. Brig, any thoughts on what comes next, your journey, or what you would like to share?
Yeah. So when I saw this article, like a couple things came to mind, kind of building off of what Jill said. The first thing was that, wellness, like a lot of other things we see cropping up in the startup space or on social or whatever, is a fad, but access, or the need for access to mental health, is not a fad. And something that I sort of think about is what happens when the fad has moved on, as Jill said, to what's next, to the infrastructure built for mental health care services, especially in rural areas. I think a lot of these virtual options cropped up as the need for mental health care grew, or the recognition of the need for it grew, and the actual, physical in-person services were not able to expand to meet that need, especially in really rural spaces. So when the fad has moved on, what happens to the folks that kind of rely on those services? The second thought I just had was the slow replacement of maybe physical or in-person services for virtual services works for a lot of industries. I don't think it works for all industries, education being an obvious one to me, and mental health care being another one. There's a lot of reasons for that, but just one sort of anecdotal thing that I think is interesting to think about is not everybody has the space in their own home to have a conversation with the therapist in private. You might have kids, you might have a partner, and you might live in a studio apartment, rather than a house where you have space. That's just one of the many things that are important to think about as we hopefully don't rely on the sort of expansion of virtual or startup-based mental health services.
I love that perspective. You guys, I hope you take care this weekend. Have a relaxing weekend. Thanks so much for dropping into this, and we will talk to you next week.